Welcome, viewers. On behalf of Iravati Research and Communication Center, this is your host, Pratim Ranjan Bose. In this edition of CEO Speak, I have with me Mr. Anjani Mandal, CEO and co-founder of Fortigo, a truck network startup which is backed by many top investors, including the IT superstar, Mr. Nandan Nilekani. An IIT-trained engineer, Mr. Mandal spent 28 years in IT, BPO, and manufacturing industry before setting up Fortigo in 2015. Welcome, Mr. Mandal.
Good to be here, Pratim, and thanks for having me.
Thanks. Road transport handles about 65% of the freight and 85% of passenger traffic in India and contribute 3.6% of GDP. Fortigo is an organized player in the trucking segment, which is overwhelmingly dominated by the unorganized players, leading to system inefficiencies. Based out of Bengaluru, Fortigo uses technology to aggregate services, monitor and manage the fleet movement to improve fleet capacity utilization, thereby ensuring better returns to the truckers and optimizing customer satisfaction. Better logistics is key to higher growth. India's logistics cost is estimated at 14% of GDP as against 8% in the USA. As part of its goal to make Indian economy competitive, the Narendra Modi government is paying unprecedented attention in improving the logistics efficiency. In the past, logistics sector grew in a disintegrated manner. This led to cost overlaps. For example, Indian Railways moved away from carrying parcel loads back in the 1980s to cover its own inefficiency. This led to boom in truck movement post-liberalization. The result is disastrous. Majority of India's $14 billion export cargo to Bangladesh originate in Western and Southern India, and almost all of them move by trucks, which is costly. Ideally, there should have been nodal movements by rail, and trucks should have ensured doorstep delivery to the customer and the seller. The newly launched PM Gati Shakti project aims to reorganize the transport logistics business through multimodal transfers. Given this background, we will discuss the emerging possibilities and potentials in logistics sector in India, and particularly in the eastern and northeastern India. So, Mr. Mandal, the first question first. From the cozy confines of IT to the rugged world of trucking, what was the inspirational trigger behind this shift? And if you kindly give a brief profile of Fortigo for the benefit of our viewers, and also just elaborate the journey so far.
Cozy confines of IT probably is not the correct term. Relative to field work, it's let's say the complications are in a different area, and surely it is far more white-collared people and knowledge workers than anything else. But one part of my career, which is slightly different, is that my last assignment was actually in a manufacturing and fulfillment company. It's had an extensive supply chain, and it was operating in an area which is not very well connected with the rest of it, even though it is one of the market leaders in the space it is. So my exposure was for a good 5+ years in terms of supply chain itself. Of course, there is another aspect to things that I started my career really in a hardware company, and hardware of IT is very intensive with respect to field. So combination of both of these things and background in manufacturing at the start of the career as well as the last 5 years before the startup is which helped making a transition, as what you are saying, of a very, very unorganized sector. But even this unorganized sector, the opportunity which we were catering to really is in terms of using technology to drive efficiency, which means, yes, you cannot do any change without being a part of it, irrespective of how hard it is. It does help that you have technology facilitation so that a significant part of what you would do manually is moved out. And the reality is this, that the correct technologies for being able to cater to the entire long distance space of transportation would not have been possible if the cloud had not been coming on its own. And the cloud is a mainstay of services as a basis for applications and deploying across various organizations. So that is something which just was a whole lot of things which are coming together. So on the regulatory side, you had GST coming in. On the regulatory side, you had the national toll system, which was coming into place. On the regulatory side, there was a push, very hard push to avoid dealing in cash and moving from unorganized to organized. All of these necessarily mean adoption of technology. And if you remember back in 2015-16, the spread of mobile computing was already there. Internet penetration was across all businesses, and mobile internet was poised to spread across. Combination of all of this meant that in the road logistics sector, where people would carry significant amounts of cash, now you need not have done it, and you could do digital purchases of such things as fuel and toll. And if I was to give you an example, in those days, a particular journey of a truck, if it costed 50,000, about 25 to 30,000 would go into fuel and toll and local expenses. Trying to carry that expense. So imagine a situation where a particular fleet owner starts from somewhere in Tamil Nadu, goes to Delhi, from Delhi goes to, let's say, Nagpur, and from Nagpur comes back to Tamil Nadu, let's say for the moment, in Chennai itself. In that circuit, the person would have earned a revenue of maybe 1.3 lakhs. And in that 1.3 lakhs, he would have spent close to about 80,000. And all of it so far would have been in cash. Now imagine a situation where he's also collecting the previous round when he had done that, the balance payment from the places which he had served. He would have 1 lakh rupee with him, which on the highway is not a very smart thing to do because cash was one of the easiest pilfered and lost. And banking, trying to deposit cash anywhere in any account, constraints had started. So the best way to do things is to carry minimal cash for on the way, and then you do the digital purchases. And as soon as the GST came in with e-way bills being mandated, it was necessary for technology to come in. So the net result of all of this was that it was the ideal situation for being able to try to change the sector and get more and more unorganized players into the organized, because the unorganized player would always have to go through via media or intermediary before he would find the next one. So typically, let's say a 30-day month, he would do 4 trips of 5 days each. And that would be fantastic. Why? Because the rest of the time would be spent in loading truck, unloading truck, and waiting for the next one. And even if the person had a lot of contacts, he would still not be able to do more than about 20 days or 19 days of work. Right? So all this helped facilitate it. And plus, the optimization which is required really is for supply chain visibility when it is there, that facilitates optimization. Those technologies were also not available there. So we created a platform which integrated all of this and provided supply chain visibility across all the chain, which means the shipper, the consignee, the recipient, as well as the fleet owner, as well as the driver, and whoever is the transporter. So that was the basis on which the entire model was created. And so the transition from IT primarily to what you would say as technology-enabled logistics services was not so difficult. Yes, it was complex. You had to interface with a bank. You had to set up payment systems. You had to interface technologically with the national toll system. You have to interface with large oil companies and be able to exchange data, remit money electronically, and provide the status to everyone who ever bought or sold on the platform.
And probably one part of the stakeholder, that is the drivers, they are not very educated. So that probably adds another dimension to the whole issue.
That is true. There is a bit of an exception here in the sense that they're very smart on numbers, and they can obviously read the names of places wherever they go because it's written in English as well as Hindi. And they are familiar with, and they're long distance players, and it is mandated that they be slightly better off. Fortunately, we built an application which was multi-link. Okay. And that helped the situation to a certain extent. But in the long distance space, you deal with, let's say, slightly better off than the intra-city kind of logistics where the education level is very, very restricted. Now, in terms of, you also asked me of what has been the journey so far of Portigo. So we started in 2015 and we built the technology, finished it by 2017. We built a supply pool of large number of fleet owners who were added to the network. And in 2018 is when we started providing services to large customers. And we moved very, very aggressively in the FMCG sector as well as the metals and minerals. And we served all of them, the leaders who were there in this, and we served a whole lot of industrial segment, market leaders of their respective spaces. We grew rapidly from near zero in 2018 beginning, and by 2020, we were at a level of more than 120 crores per annum. And that's when the COVID hit, and the long distance, which is based on manufacturing, was one of the worst hit. So the part which continued was FMCG and agriculture. So we continued moving forward on that. And that business, but the rest of all the manufacturing came to a grinding halt. And we moved from 125 to somewhere around 70 to 75, 80 per annum. And that continued through 2020 right till the end after the COVID started. And it continued into 21 because the first wave moved into the second wave. And even though a lot of people learned how to do it, but the market had not yet picked up in 21 either. And it is finally only in 21 after the vaccination became wider spread and the infections came down, that there was confidence amongst the industry also that even if there are interruptions, we'll be able to manage. And 2021 last quarter is when everyone started planning for rapid growth. We also did the same. And since the beginning of the current calendar year, 2022, we jumped back straight to the same level that we were in 2022 within a period of less than 6 weeks. And now we are on a rapid growth again. We hope that we'll be double the size by the end of this current financial year. So we'll surely be hoping to be crossing 20 crores a month, which is closer to 250 crores per year.
Nice.
So that's where we are today. And the business is essentially the same, technology-based road transportation and facilitating various measures of efficiency while serving the leaders of the industry in improving their own supply chain.
So you actually answered part of the issues that I would be raising in the next, is that COVID, the trouble that COVID brought in is primarily a disruption in the logistics system worldwide. This is the basic issue that the world is still finding so hard to keep up with. How has been the scene in Indian trucking system? You partly told. What is not told is what kind of impact it has left on the business and how long term would that be, because we are aware of the business pattern. Sometimes such disruptions do help to restructure where restructure it faster than we expected. So any such trend in the truck logistics sector?
So there are multiple things which happened. Okay. And I will now split this into logistics overall versus road logistics for long distance. I already shared our own experiences with respect to long distance. But there's another aspect of the supplier end, which means the truckers themselves. Okay. Like you were sharing upfront, and like I corroborated, most of them are the unorganized sector. So when that happens, that means they are financially not as resilient as you would like them to be. The consequence of that was that more than 30% of the population of trucks moved away from long distance. And a lot of the large players, they reduced their total fleet ownership. And a lot of the small ones just walked out of the business. There are significant percentage who also handed it back to the finance companies. You would have heard recently that the truck finance companies, even of the manufacturers, have had a lot of delinquency in the loans which they had given out. They used it to expand their business, but it is also a drag today. And the reason for that is the delinquency, which was because of a reduced market size and the period of 1.5 years when a truck would be able to go to a particular place, but they would not know if they would be able to return as rapidly. They may not get a return load, or there may be a lockdown. Any of these could happen, and this continued for a good 14 months before it became slightly more regular. If you remember, the Northeast and Kerala were two ends which were heavily impacted.
Exactly.
And that cycle in which they were there were different. So if any truck moved from east or west or north to south, it would be stuck because the entire load pattern itself changed. And the same thing happened to Northeast. So the supply position, if anything went towards the east, finding a return load would again be so much more difficult. And this resulted in an overall network. See, in the long distance space, it's an entire network which has to be efficient. And as a consequence of COVID, with a lot of manufacturing units having come down because of their delinquency and them not paying the truckers, that also contributed to the same situation. So my outstanding, I do not get in time or do not get at all. And plus, new business is not assured. I'm bound to fail. That is what happened to a significant number of fleet owners. And that's one very, very negative impact which happened. Now, the good part about it is those who survived, fortunately, are the more organized players with formal borrowing capability. And those are the ones who survived. So essentially what you have, let's say if the formal piece was 20 out of 100, most of those who went out of the 30 were the unorganized.
Okay.
So now you have 20 or 25 as a part of the 75. So a larger percentage is now organized. So the move which we're talking of, unorganized to organized, was this. And plus, the COVID period also did a lot towards forcing people to get familiar with mobile technology as a means of communication, doing business, interacting. And it went into every home because schools and every education piece had to be necessarily done online. As a consequence of this, technology familiarity of mobile computing and mobile internet became very, very common. So all these things combined with digital payments, which became all over the place, the ability to be able to place orders, and the familiarity with mobile computing through wireless internet is something which the number of persons who became familiar with was very high. And you already know that even the next generation, practically everyone has mobile phones and smartphones, and it moved on to its own from there. So all positive developments. So yes, there are a lot of negatives through the COVID period. A lot of things went down, but as things stand right now, it has come out much stronger than before and much cleaner, if I may say so.
And you expect the unorganized, the unorganized was pretty small, so we will not, there may not be a very substantial change in the overall scenario, but you expect the trend to continue from unorganized to organized.
Let's say those who do not move to organized will get marginalized faster and faster. I want to point out another thing, the e-commerce delivery. Right. So I was talking mostly of the long distance right now. Right. Now the e-commerce delivery, significant part of the solutions which need to be found is in the last mile and first mile. When you're doing e-commerce delivery, any guy who's got a small truck and is a truck owner for intra-city logistics, if they are not capable of understanding and using mobile internet-based computing on a smartphone, they don't have a business, because that's the only way for them to get the business today. Because just like Uber resulted in the neighborhood place to be completely wiped out from where you had to go and get your yellow and black taxi, today it is not completely wiped out, but the number of places where you will get trucks are only so many. There are parking spaces, but it is much more prevalent for any small business to hire trucks, small trucks, through an application on the mobile and move forward from it. So I believe that this dominant portion of e-commerce, which is in the last mile, is now very familiar with mobile computing, wireless mobile computing. And the same thing in terms of the other things that, other reasons that I spoke of in the long distance has also happened. So by and large, if you look at it, intra-city, which was the most unorganized, and intra-city, which was, you could say, the least technology enabled and least educated in terms of the driver's level of competence, suddenly is the one who cannot survive without this. So it has resulted in a lot of people upgrading themselves, understanding the situation, being actually able to transact business with mobile computing through the smartphones.
So there has been a major behavioral change and displacement happening within the system. The next question is, a couple of questions are on the benefits of things that have been happening for last 7-8 years. First of all, there has been a spree of highway building in India. Some 30 plus kilometers a day is no joke. And we are seeing the change. In UP is now length and breadth connected by expressways. What we don't know is to what extent they are helping goods transport. That we are yet to get a lot of feedback on that.
So let's look at it in various pieces. From the buyer of the service is one perspective. From the seller of the service is another. From the seller of the service, from about 18 days of start to end of actual, doing business out of 30, the person is actually moved to event 23 or 24. The reason is that they are able to move faster. The infrastructure has actually transitioned over the last 5 years to a much higher level, and the pace of movement of long distance trucks is substantially high.
Okay.
Right? Having said that, I also want to point out another aspect. Unfortunately, the sender and the receiver is the place where the truck has to wait. So on the highway, whatever the government has created as infrastructure has had a significant impact. But from the seller's perspective, have I started doing more trips? Let's just say that if the loading and unloading were far more efficient, I would have been able to have at least another 15% bump in the quantum of revenue that I could have got with the same asset.
Okay.
Ecosystem, it would have come down. So as an example, if I have to load a vehicle and I have to come in the morning and I'm released only at 12 in the midnight, I've lost that day.
Right.
I arrive at night. Next day, I'm not unloaded at 9, 10, or 11. I have to wait for one full day and I'm unloaded only the next day. So at a minimum, it is 2 days. That results in a fair amount of inefficiency for any, right? So I've completed the day in 3 days. I completed the trip in 3 days and I spent 2 days in loading and unloading. Unfortunately, everybody is leaving it to someone else to optimize, and they have been able to, because of the supply-demand equation, where the number of suppliers of trucks were far more than demand. So the buyer of the service could get away with anything. So they have ridiculous rates for waiting. As an example, it costs 60,000 rupees, let's say, as an EMI. My amount of outflow every month is 60,000. But I get paid only 1,000 rupees per day for detention or waiting, which means every day that I wait, I'm out of pocket by 1,000 rupees, right? Because 60,000 divided by 30 is 2,000. And on that day, I earn 1,000 because I have to wait. Now, all this adds up into the cost of logistics. And overall, systematically, I believe the blame is for the consignor and consignee who treat the long distance truck as an extended inventory holding capacity at a low cost. Right? So the inefficiency today is not in the movement itself, because you have the toll. So the waiting at the toll has reduced. The pace with which the trucks can now move is also higher. There is another change which has happened. The trucks were always licensed to carry far more tonnage, and they're able to do that. So the cost per ton on account of the actual trip has gone lower. But unfortunately, the wait time at the loading and unloading has not improved in any fashion over the last 5 to 6 years, barring a couple of companies. There's another aspect which is very important to understand, is the fuel being about 55 to 60% of the overall freight. Now, when that goes up significantly, there is no choice. So as a buyer of service today, I'm possibly buying the service at 50% higher, despite all these efficiencies which have come in. So when you look at that, you realize that the toll has gone up over the last 5 years by about 25%. Infrastructure has improved, but the fuel is very, very much more significantly higher. And that has resulted in the costs being higher by overall 40 to 50% vis-a-vis what it was 5 years back. So there are many variables in long distance logistics. It's to do with the infrastructure on which you ride the truck, the loading efficiency, the unloading efficiency, this waiting time before you find the second load. A lot of those things can be helped. But if the shipper themselves are not interested in releasing your truck and do not play their part, the inefficiency in this will continue to be.
It's very interesting. So you're saying that trucks can move faster today,
Significantly faster
than the 300 kilometers per day average. But there is no use of it doing it, because you have to keep waiting at the unloading or the loading end.
That's right. There is a certain use, surely, because they are able to do in a month maybe one more trip. But they could easily have done 2 more trips and become profitable or reduce the cost if that efficiency was there in loading and unloading.
Okay.
I'm going to treat fuel as an uncontrollable variable.
That is a variable. As you run, you have to pay.
That's right. So it is uncontrollable. So cost increases because of fuel. I do not consider as something which is to do with efficiency.
Right.
Efficiency is the delta in the time that you are able to reduce. If I reduce the time in loading, unloading, or the commute itself, that means the trip, I have improved my efficiency. If I have reduced the amount of time it takes for me to find a load whenever I have unloaded, it is something else. And all these are reductions and efficiency enhancement. So I have got a situation now where on the road takes lesser time. Finding the next load takes lesser time. But my loading and unloading has not changed. If anything, it has gone worse.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So, and it adds up to 15% of the efficiency.
Yeah, very easily.
Okay.
Yeah, just look at it this way. I do 4 trips and I wait for 1 extra day in all the places. I've lost 4 days out of the 30.
Right.
I could have done 1 extra trip.
Right. Right.
That's it.
Is there, just a quick question, is there a way to solve this riddle? Like, sometimes, you go for containerization or this or that. Is there a way to solve this riddle?
Well, what you are saying are possible once you have reached a certain level of efficiency of loading and unloading. Containerization, maybe not, but palletization, surely yes.
Okay. For bulk commodities.
Now, the reality is this, there are moves to be able to convert movement in palletization, unfortunately, because the cost of pallet and the return of pallet and the, what you would say as the common availability of the trucks which are used to move pallets from the warehousing place to the truck for loading, the forklifts, they are not as common as you would. They need investment. And a lot of warehouses are not organized or they don't have adequate trucks. It's only now where the warehousing infrastructure is coming up, where they are automating and making it efficient. But when it comes to a factory of a medium-sized organization or a smaller organization, it continues to be the same.
As you said, the warehousing technology, use of technology in warehouses, and probably also use of right vehicles. That might also, because on an average, the size of vehicle in the Indian roads is still on the lower side, right? So maybe these are the issues which are holding on improving the efficiency, according to you.
I would say that warehousing, surely yes. Okay, and it helps to have larger trucks, but in one way, yes, but in another dimension, unless the consumption and shipment are matched up, that has a much higher play. Okay. So when you're talking of bulk goods and you're shipping between 2 places, heavy loads, it is one aspect. Okay. That usually is to do with manufactured products which are metal and steel. But if you moved, let's say instead of a 20-25 ton truck, which is 20 ton is quite common, and the demand is of 2 trucks, then yes, possibly a 30, 40 or higher tonnage would be all right. But the reality is that very often, many companies don't ship 2 trucks of the same type between 2 places.
Okay.
They would rather keep the inventory lesser. I'm talking of, I'll talk of 2 industries separately. One is FMCG, and the other one is metals and minerals and industrials, which are heavy products, high density products. Now, when you're talking of FMCG, the optimization is of a different type. When you're talking of movement of bulk, let's say if I have to move 1,000 tons of steel between one place and another, I'll do it if I have a 20-ton truck. I will do it with 50 trucks. If I had a 30-ton truck, I would do it with 33 trucks. Those circumstances, it definitely helps. When I have to do the same thing for agricultural products, it again is the same. It so happens that metals, minerals, and bulk agricultural goods, I'm talking of sheer grain movement, is very substantial piece of the overall logistics. It also so happens that grains, most of the movement is already by train.
Yeah.
However, for metals, there are two parts to it. If I have a bulk movement from one place to another, I may be able to make it more efficient. But then that particular truck would be a waste entirely for FMCG. Because FMCG is to match the origin and the destination. Origin is the manufacturing place or the warehouse where it is stored. Destination is the consumption hub. If my consumption hub itself is a certain amount, I don't want to load double the amount of inventory and block my capital.
So what I understand that, we need to first have that much of critical capacity on either side to support that trade. Otherwise, there will be less capacity utilization. I mean, and low capacity utilization means higher freight rates. Simple.
That's right.
We had a lot of investments and developments on the, as you said, on digitization front. UPI has been a real revolution. It has taken banking to the mobile phone of almost everyone now. GST came. Now FASTag was there. Now from FASTag, they are moving to satellite-based systems. So a lot of things happened. And but yet we are yet to see probably, or at least we don't see the change on ground. And is it because of that problem that you said, the loading, unloading part, the warehousing part, is holding on the entire system at ransom now?
I would say that the largest contributor is that. Okay, the largest contributor of inefficiency, so to say, is surely the loading and unloading efficiency. There are other pieces which need incremental improvement to be able to reduce cost. But I agree with you that it is these manufacturing units, warehouses, or the warehouses in between, which need substantial efficiency enhancement in loading and unloading. I'll give you an example, which is actually coming from some other country, right? There it is necessary for you to release the truck in 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not release the truck in 4 hours, in to out, you pay extra.
Right.
Today here in India, it is actually beneficial for me to keep the truck waiting for 3 days, 4 days.
The opportunity cost of waiting is low. That is the particular issue.
I have a fixed capacity. I am not able to increase the warehouse capacity without making a huge amount of investment. But if I have to temporarily cater to a higher demand, I need more goods available here. So I'll just leave it on the truck.
Is there any regional difference in terms of these efficiencies? Particularly,
I would say that over the last 2 or 3 years, with more and more companies moving to better organized warehousing and shipment, the differences are lesser. However, having said that, there is a lot of shipment which happens from storage places which are attached with manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, then all the manufacturing units which are modern and which are in strong, large hubs, those are significantly more efficient.
Okay.
You would consequently feel that a manufacturing hub state like TN or Gujarat would be far more efficient with people who are far more knowledgeable and capable of bringing in efficiency in unloading and loading. But that level of efficiency may not be there in each and every part of Central. Now,
Very common
let's say
economic logic.
in the Northeast and East, where the investments are more modern and newer, and the warehouses, let's say, if they are not traditional but more modern, then the efficiency levels will always be significantly higher.
Back to Northeast. So how do you see the region? Well, I said that I see appetite, but you are the man who knows it, because whosoever is in logistics, they get the first feel of change. Whether all these big talks about investments or etc., whether they are really translating into reality and what changes they are bringing into. So you know it better than me. What change you see in Northeast, or at all there is any change?
So one of the things which has happened, and
I'm talking from logistics perspective.
Yes, there is a slightly more recent development. The investment level in West Bengal.
North of West Bengal.
Yeah, north of West Bengal, which is the gateway to the entire Northeast, has become very much higher.
Mm-hmm.
And that has come up in order to facilitate the two-way movement of goods from Northeast to the rest of the country, and from rest of the country, it comes there and then carries on to the Northeast.
Right.
So if you look at the units which are coming up in Siliguri area, and the amount of movement increase which has happened there is very, very significant.
Right.
Now, we do a fair amount of movement, bulk movement from the far end of Northeast, Tripura, Agartala, that belt. And I can tell you one thing, that the movement is only increasing because there are agricultural products which are there, which are in great demand. And there are companies who have invested, whether it is tea or whether it is timber or whether it is the FMCG products which are made in those locations. They cater to things, and the well-being of the state as it keeps on going up. The direct impact is visible on Northeast.
Just in this connection, as you said about north of Bengal, yes, the road connecting UP is also coming up. The other day it was announced. All these new things that are coming up, the river transport is, well, it will take at least 5 to 6 years to stabilize. I mean, that is what I think, to build the ecosystem. But how do you look at these changes? I'm sure you are keeping a watch on these things.
So let's just say that the waterway is one thing, but I believe that the rail connectivity and the efficiency will play a bigger role for and faster than the waterways. But connecting Northeast for movement, efficient movement, for movement, let's say from Orissa, Bengal to Northeast, will become more efficient when there are trade agreements with Bangladesh and free movement. And the water movement, there are some pilots which are going on, and you have a hub coming up about 60 kilometers from Guwahati, where there is a confluence of rail, road, of course, as well as the waterway, where you would be able to move goods from one means to another. So you could have a large vessel coming in to a place which is Jogigopa. I mean, it's still coming up. So let's say it is an industrial, it's very close to an industrial area, and it's not too far from Guwahati, which is a consumption hub and a distribution point, and it can cater to the entire Northeast from there. So a significant part of the journey and number of days and cost is eliminated. And there are large companies of bulk products which are doing this very successfully.
Now you have, you said you are already doing business in Tripura, your business is in Northeast. You, some time ago, I think you shared some bits of your plans in Tripura, in Northeast. Next kind of venture or something. Will you please share
I would
that?
prefer not to talk about it right now, but let's just look at it this way. There is a momentum which is building up, okay? And there is an opportunity to be able to distribute and have a well-connected digital supply chain across the areas of agriculture, which are commercial products, okay? Now, there is a potential for digitization in those places. But I would prefer to say that right now the environment is building up, the momentum is building up, the investments are taking place. We are possibly a bit away from that still, maybe several quarters, but it is definitely an area to invest in and to be in, because whenever there is an increase in the overall well-being of the entire set of population of a geography. Industry picks up, movement picks up, manufacturing picks up, employment levels pick up, and it keeps on that full cycle. I'm very bullish about it, but it is again like my normal inclination is using technology to be able to make things efficient and more, what you would say, more aligned to the current times.
Yeah, the technology helped us organize this.
Yes. It'll
meeting
be
with you.
Essentially digitization of various parts of the business.
Thanks, Mr. Mandal, for giving us time and sharing your thoughts. Logistics is key for the growth, and the region was lagging in terms of it. Particularly Northeast, it was decades behind. So I'm sure you are, you will do great there, and I'll be waiting to see Fortigo to be, to get into that league of startups.
Thanks, Pratim. But time will tell. These are strange times nowadays with all the factors of you have a war, you have very high oil prices, you have inflation going on. So there is a bit of a blip which always comes.
Obviously.
But in the medium term, long term, I believe the opportunities are correct. Digitization, technology-based businesses are the way that everything will happen. I'm essentially waiting for all the ups and downs of things to be more ups than downs like it's going on right now. We should be all right.
Thank you so much. Thanks.